Hey there! This presentation is all about psychological literary criticism. Psychological literary criticism is a literary criticism which, in method, concept, or form, is influenced by the tradition of psychoanalysis begun by Sigmund Freud. This approach reflects the effect that modern psychology has had upon both literature and literary criticism. It argues that literary texts, like dreams, express the secret unconscious desires and anxieties of the author, that a literary work is a manifestation of the author's own neurosis. One may psychoanalyze a particular character within a literary work, but it is usually assumed that all such characters are projections of the author's psyche.
What are the viewpoints about psychological literary criticism?
To Sigmund Freud, dreams are the royal road to the personal conscious of the dreamer and have a direct relation to literature, which often has the structure of a dream. Jacques Lacan, a disciple of Freud, was influenced by Freud's psychoanalytic theories and contended that dreams mirrored our unconscious and reflected the way we use language. Another Freud disciple, Carl Jung, eventually rejected Freud's theory that dreams are the manifestation of the personal unconsciousness, claiming instead that they reflect archetypes that tap into the collective unconsciousness of all humanity.
But how really is psychological literary criticism done?
In this form of literary criticism, critics think about the symbols in the work and what they might mean. They also evaluate the psychological state of the characters and examine their motivations and actions with an understanding of psychology in mind. Taking an example like a horror story where the narrator kills his mother, the critic might look to the character's past to understand why he committed matricide. At the same time, this criticism can explore matricide as a literary theme and may explore the author's own history to determine why he or she chose to tell that particular story.
What are the approaches in psychological literary criticism?
Psychological criticism has a number of approaches, but in general, it usually employs one or more of three approaches. First is an investigation of the creative process of the artist. What is the nature of literary genius and how does it relate to the normal mental functions? The second, a psychological study of a particular artist, usually noting how an author's biographical circumstances affect or influence their motivations and or behavior. And lastly, the analysis of fictional characters using the language and methods of psychology. Are there risks in making psychological literary criticism? Analysts have to be careful with psychological criticism because it can become reductive in nature. It is also important to avoid projecting personal psychological issues onto works in analysis. When considering the history of the author, critics must be careful to avoid attributing incorrect motivations to the authors, and they also want to consider how knowing about an author's past might affect the reading of a story. Being aware that an author had survived a violent crime, for example, might cause someone to read a story about vengeance or violence very differently.
Last but not the least, can psychological literary criticism be useful in some way?
Reader responses can also be a subject of interest and, in some cases, psychological criticism may even play a role in psychotherapy. Patients can be presented with reading material for discussion and their responses can be integrated into a course of therapy. Sometimes, stories provide an outlet for emotions or help patients process their feelings, and responses can also provide insights into topics that might bear fruit if subjected to psychoanalysis. So that's all for today, guys. We hope that you've learned something about psychological literary criticism. Till next time, thank you for listening.